Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Jack.
Welcome, Tricia. Thank you for having me back.
Well, thank you for being here today. We have Jack Maher. I'm going to do it. Maher. Jack Maher. And that's the only way I can get it. I'm so sorry. We had him on a couple of months ago, I guess last season, at the point this will air, about your historical fiction, the story of your dad, Frederick Douglass, who became a Denver Art Museum pioneer. And that was so interesting just to learn about his history in Colorado. And you have a new book out. You Were Chosen, just like Mary, a true story of love and faith. And I believe it is about your wife, correct?
You are correct. And just a slight correction, it's my grandfather who was the focus of my first book, Poppy. Yes, this book is called You Were Chosen, just like Mary, a true story of love and faith. And this one I put everything into that I had, Tricia. It took a lot out of me because of the story. And yes, there is pain there, but there's also a great deal of love and a great deal of strength. And I figured I wanted to try to, in a very authentic way, share with readers who had the interest my story in hopes that maybe it will help them with their faith, or if they've gone through loss. And, there are going to be people that are going to read this book, which is through a Catholic lens, that maybe will just say, no way. But I would just ask that no matter where you are on a spiritual walk, or if you have yet to begin one, or you have no interest in making that walk, that you come to it with an open mind, because everything in here happened. I am a journalist with half a century of storytelling. And I just, that's all I ask. Come with an open heart and an open mind.
Yeah, I think everyone has a different grief process. And I'm super impressed that you were able to write about her and see all the faith and the hope and the love. We've shared personally a little bit about her story, and it just inspires me that you were able to write this. I have another friend and me talk about grief quite often, and we're always saying how we would like this to be more normalized, to be able to talk about it and not be such a ick topic,
right.
Because so many people live with grief every day, and that's part of their normal daily routine, whether it be a spouse or a sister or a brother or a child, and I can't even imagine that pain, so we won't go there. But yes, so tell me about your wife and how you decided to write her biography.
Well, you bet. And just in response to your last comment, I mean, death is inevitable. And, at some point in our lives, we are going to face it, or it's going to face us. So I'll tell you just a little bit about my background first so I can set the stage. And this is not to impress you or your listeners or viewers, but hopefully to just maybe set some credibility down so that, I'm not just some nut. So as I said, I've done this for over a half century. Much of my career was spent at 9 News, where I was executive producer for 34 years, multimedia journalist, picked up 4 Emmys, started the morning show. And so, a lot of producing, a lot of writing, a lot of storytelling, thousands of hours of television, actually. Well, anyway, I'm going to take you back to November 21st, 1970. And that is when I was a long-haired 16-year-old hippie high schooler. And there was a dance at a Catholic school in Denver, St. James School. And I was there to help support this band that was performing with lighting. I wasn't really trained to do it, but I just figured I'll give it a shot. And my contribution included this multicolored light that was kind of cool and very much in time with the 70s still hippie era. Well, I was at this dance. The band was called Phaedra, and they were playing a cover version of Neil Young's Cinnamon Girl. And if you're a Neil Young fan, I know you've heard this song. And I looked across the gym, and there by the exit was this beautiful redhead. And she was way out of my league, but I decided to give it a try. I figured, what the heck? And I walked across the floor. I tapped her on the shoulder, and I said, "Would you like to dance?" And she flipped around. She had the most intense, iridescent green eyes. And as I say, this red hair that was really more the color of a freshly minted copper penny. She was just beautiful. And to my surprise, she said yes. And I said, "Well, my name's Jack. What's your name?" She said, "My name's Becky." And I'm telling you, Tricia, it was love at first sight. And from that dance forward, we spent almost 49 years together as a couple. And I called her Cinnamon Girl from that night because of that song that we danced to. And we celebrated November 21st, even more than we celebrated our wedding anniversary. It was just very special. Well, over the course of that 49-year relationship, we had 3 children, 2 grandchildren, a full life, a busy life, lots of wonderful shared experiences. And I was not Catholic when I met Becky. I became Catholic in order to marry her. And so I converted from my previous faith, which wasn't much of a faith at all, which was Episcopalian. And I started to learn more about the faith through Becky. She really was the one who got me involved in what is it like going to a Catholic Mass and seeing all of these symbols and what do they mean. And part of that was the Eucharist. And for a lot of people, that is sort of the roadblock with Catholicism, because we as Catholics believe it is truly the body and blood of Christ, not just a symbol. And it's a beautiful part of the faith. One of the extensions from that is something called Eucharistic adoration. And if you are going through something, whether it's a job loss, grief, as we talked about, a health challenge, you're encouraged to go into a chapel. Most of these Catholic churches have them. And the Eucharist, which is a piece of bread until it is consecrated by a priest and becomes the body of Christ, is placed in this beautiful gold sculpture called a monstrance. It looks like a sunburst. And that is on an altar in the chapel, and you kneel before it and you pray, or you can sit and just spend time with Christ to help with whatever the trouble is that you're having. Well, in the case of our family, our oldest son ended up as a Navy combat pilot. And he flew an aircraft called the Prowler. It was an electronic attack aircraft. It was used in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, and it had a unique mission. It had this capability of sending out these electronic pulses to disable IEDs, improvised explosive devices, from the air, making it safe for troops to go through areas. He helped clear these areas. Dangerous work. Carrier-based, so he, flew and trapped on aircraft carriers. There was some communication from him during his service, but not always. It was spotty. So we never really knew what he was doing or where he was or the danger he was in. And those of you with military connections, you know what that's like as a parent, and especially as a mom. Well, Becky was a corporate travel agent, and she handled stress really well and anxiety pretty well. But when it came to Matt and this whole military phase of his life, it was hard for her. And so she turned to Eucharistic adoration to help with this anxiety. She went every Friday night to the chapel we had at our church, and she would spend an hour there, and it really did help her to calm down and to feel some peace. Well, May 31st, 2019, she was in this chapel with just one other man, and he was really upset. There was something going on with this guy. He was sobbing just out loud. Quite apparent that there was something going on there. Becky was pretty shy by nature. But after their hour of adoration, Eucharistic adoration was finished, they both went out into the parking lot, and Becky went up to this guy, again, very uncharacteristically, and said, "Hey, looks like you're new here to our church, which is called Ave Maria." She said, "I just want you to know that we've got a great church here. Our pastor is amazing. We have all of these ministries, and one of them I'm part of called the Guardians." And he says, "What are the Guardians?" He says, "Well, our job during Mass is to stand near the front and again off to the side, so it's not real visible, but we're looking as people go up to receive the Eucharist. Again, we think it's the body of Christ, and the wine is the blood of Christ, to make sure people are receiving it with care and with reverence." And she said, "It's kind of funny. I'm the only girl in the Guardians. The rest are guys." So this man, this stranger, turned to her and said, "So you were chosen, just like Mary." Becky then fell. She suffered a massive brain aneurysm at that very moment. She was with us for 3 days. Well, after she was transported to the hospital, and we were all in our hospital vigil with her, we knew nothing of this man and this story. We just heard that she had collapsed in the church parking lot. And we were, as you can imagine, overcome with grief, with sadness, with confusion. We questioned, why would God allow this to happen to this beautiful, caring, selfless woman? And she exercised, she was into health, nutrition. She was always getting kidded about the fact that she was so into the world of health. A brain aneurysm? Really? We just couldn't understand it. And then I get this call from one of the deacons at our church, Deacon Pete, and he said, "Have you heard about what happened?" I said, "Well, I know she fell in the parking lot. I know it was a brain aneurysm. And I know the doctors have told me that she is not going to recover from this." And he said, "Well, you need to listen to this guy who was with her." He gave me the phone number, and I called. His name was Oliver, and he had a very thick accent. As it turned out, he was an immigrant from Nigeria. And he had come here looking for work and a new life, a new start, and he was having trouble with the culture and the language and all of it. And he told me about what happened. And when he explained how he told her, "You were chosen just like Mary," right before she fell. Well, I'm telling you, Tricia, all of the darkness that I had in here in my heart spiraled out and away. And when I told my family this story, it was the same for them. It was as if God had broken through and was showing himself in a way that was unmistakable. I thanked Oliver and I said, "I want you to make sure you're at the funeral so you can be there and help pay tribute to Becky." Well, there were so many things that then started revealing themselves, not just what he told her. My granddaughter, Grace, who calls me Granders, she said, "You need to look at the calendar, the Catholic calendar, the night this happened, May 31st. is the feast of the visitation, when in our faith we celebrate Mary, who goes to visit her cousin Elizabeth. Mary is pregnant with Christ. Elizabeth is pregnant with John the Baptist. It is the basis for a conversation that is known now as the Magnificat, which is Mary taking the words of God and making them her own. I took another look at the calendar. The night I asked her to dance, the night I first saw my cinnamon girl, November 21st, is the feast of the presentation, when Mary is presented at temple by her parents. The church where this happened, Ave Maria, translates from the Latin to Hail Mary. You could say this is all some grand cosmic coincidence. Not for us. Not for us, Tricia. And it just continued to happen. After Becky's funeral, and I did have the power of God to tell this story to a very packed funeral. I mean, between all the people we knew, it was like a mass. It was hard, but I got through it. But I heard gasps from people as they heard this story of Becky's encounter with Oliver. After the funeral, we decided to celebrate her by going up into the mountains. She loved to hike. We had a lot of hiking time together. One of our favorite spots was a place called Three Creeks up by Georgetown. She loved it because as you went along this creek, there were columbines, depending on the time of year you went. And so we were hoping for columbines. We didn't see them, but that's okay. As a family, it was an honor to celebrate her and to celebrate God and everything that had happened in nature. I even wore her backpack, which is lavender, and it has a little dangling polar bear on a keychain that made a little sound as we walked up. It was like she was still with me. But as we drove back here to our home, I was in the car with our daughter and her then boyfriend, now husband. And I noticed a storm over by Chatfield Reservoir. And suddenly there was this vibrant rainbow that extended from the storm over to C470, which we were traveling on. And in an instant, we drove into that rainbow. It filled the car with light. That's never happened to me in my life. Hasn't happened since. But for those with knowledge of the Bible and Genesis, you know that the rainbow is a sign from God that he won't destroy. It's a sign of a promise, really. Well, as things kept going, as I started to adjust to my life as a widower, suddenly all of this wildlife started showing up here where I live. We started getting twin fawns born every summer, like clockwork. I mean, we're in a place where that doesn't even make sense. They have to jump over fences to get here. Somehow they keep coming back. She loved hummingbirds. There were hummingbirds all the time. November 21st, which I mentioned, very significant day for us. I was sitting on the couch. I do a little private ceremony where I go back to the school where we danced, that first dance. And I have a little thing of champagne and I always toast her. And I play Cinnamon Girl on my phone. But I got back and it was late and I'm just sitting on the couch. And suddenly the smell of roses fills the air. There are no roses. There are no flower arrangements, but I get the smell of roses. And then a notification comes on my phone. It's from a guy I used to work with at 9 News. I had no idea he was Catholic. November 21st, as I said, very significant on the Catholic calendar, and he sent out this message. And it read, "Tonight, Mary is passing through your home." I get the roses, I get this message. Tricia, it just keeps going and going. I tried to apply logic to all of this. The only answer was God, Mary. They're showing me stuff. It set me on a spiritual journey that I am still on. It included a visit to the Holy Land before the war, a pilgrimage to all of the places where Christ walked, a visit to the Church of the Visitation. That was hard. But I did it. And that's where I told Becky's story to one of our priests who'd never heard it. Because, sometimes we change out priests, and this was a new one to Ave Maria. And after I told him the story, and there were tears in his eyes, and he asked me to start telling it at our church, because I hadn't. I don't know why. I kept it to myself. Small groups, large groups, people coming into the church for the first time, getting baptism. I've said it now dozens of times. And the power of it is incredible. More recently, I went on a pilgrimage to Marian apparition sites. These are places where we as Catholics believe Mary has appeared. Typically, it's to very young people. And this included Fatima, Lourdes, and Medjugorje. And on that trip, Tricia, I was given some incredible graces that I write about in the book. And I won't go into now because I don't think I can. I don't know that I have the strength to tell you exactly what happened. This was absolutely unmistakable about how God showed himself, revealed himself to me. I'm still on this journey. The most recent part of it was a silent retreat at the base of a glacier in Colorado, at a ranch where our Catholic Church organized a week of spiritual exercises where you read the Bible and you look at religious art and you don't talk. It's almost like if I was to ever become a monk, I guess that's what it would be like. And with all of it, as I write in the book, I think all of these things have helped fill the hole in my heart. I want to tell you just one other thing. Oliver, who was with Becky that night, after what happened, he went on a journey of his own, a journey of discernment. He wanted to know if perhaps he might be a priest. He went to a monastery in New Mexico. And as part of this process, it's kind of like what I went through. You do a lot of reflection and reading and quiet to see if God's speaking to you, if he's inviting you into that life of being a religious. Ultimately, he decided it was not for him. What he did end up doing, though, he kind of came up with his own self-styled ministry. This past summer, he has climbed, I think, all of Colorado's 14ers. Very fit guy. And in the process of those climbs, he carries a bag of rosaries with him. and he hands them out to people that he meets on the way up to the top. And in the course of this ministry, he's met a girl that he's going to marry. And he credits Becky with that. That's my story. And you've been a very patient listener, as have your listeners. And again, you could probably kind of look at this and say, well, maybe he's just like some guy on a bar stool, just telling the story, locked into it, and he's got to keep repeating it. It happened. It all happened, and more that I haven't gone into. So I offer it to you for however you want to process this and use it.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. That is so touching of a story. And I can't imagine, if I were you sitting there, I would be bawling and not even be able to finish those statements because I'm half crying now. But that's a beautiful story. And thank you so much for being here and sharing it with us. I have had similar experiences. I lost my sister, as we've talked about a couple years ago. And I will share another book that you may want to read too. It's called Over the Rainbow by Sheila Clemenson. I don't know if you've read that or heard of her, but she's very local to Denver as well. And she has it's not as faith-based, but she has so many experiences where the phone rings and there's no other explanation except that it's him. So it's interesting. I read her book and then I was searching for those experiences and they just weren't coming and I was kind of mad. And then this year I've just had like 2 or 3 of my own. So it's very unique. It's very special. I feel like people and our God or whoever we perceive to be that spiritual force in our lives can really help us in that grief. So thank you so much.
Of course, I would just say in closing, you have to open your heart. And sometimes it's hard for people to be able to see things. Because if you have a closed heart, then you'll be blind. And that, I think, is really my overarching hope for this book, is that maybe if there are hardened hearts, it'll soften them maybe a little bit.
Well, and I'm hearing it as a story of hope and connection and, recovery and, being able to, accept and move on and bring new experiences into your life, which is, I'm sure, what Becky would have wanted for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, speaking of books, there's another one called Dark Night of the Soul by Thomas More. And it's based on ancient Catholic teaching. It basically says when you have a loss, you can either sit in the grief, sit in the darkness, or you can mine it for the gold it contains. And I know that's hard for people who have loss in their lives or even a recent loss. And sometimes it will take time to find that gold, but it's there. Trust me.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Jack. You were chosen just like Mary, a true life story of love and faith about your wife, Becky. I truly appreciate you sharing this with us. And I am so excited to hear the other stories that you've placed there. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you share where we can find information about your book and how?
Yeah, I have a website that, again, is still a mouthful. It was the last time I mentioned it, but I haven't changed it because I'm just stubborn. Sandgoatmanorpublishing.com, sandgoatmanorpublishing.com, all one word. And I know you're going to be good about linking it to the show notes. But it's also on Amazon. Just look for my name and you'll find it. And I'm just so appreciative of you giving me the space and the grace to tell this story.
Of course. And thank you so much. And I know you're going to write more, so we will have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Jack.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.